Good morning folks, 21st Century Caveman here. Hope everybody's safe, hope everybody's well. So in today's video then, this will be another episode in the series How to Repoint Brickwork, How to Repoint a Wall. So today I thought I'd take the opportunity to show you how I dealt with the repointing, particularly around the bay window and the flashing, and that's a key place where water's going to get through. So I thought I'd cover that just to give you guys a bit of an idea as to how I dealt with it. Now there is some damp in the property at the moment, and when you compare the location of it, it does correspond exactly to the area where the flashing goes around the bay window. And at this point I must make it clear that I am not a professional builder. I am a very keen DIYer and experienced one. Having said that, I am very confident that the finished job will be fit for purpose and look half decent. And of course it's going to save a shed load of cash. So the first thing to do then is to remove the lead plugs which secure the flashing. So these are small thin strips of lead which have been folded up basically. They've been banged into the area between the brickwork to secure the flashing. Now, quite apart from looking a little bit unsightly, they do make it very difficult to mortar in the areas between the brickwork around it, so it's not surprising that water does frequently get in those areas. And also it can be a little bit tricky to actually get these out. Now what I've done, I've just used an old screwdriver basically, and an old blunt chisel and a pair of pliers. So just a couple of things then to bear in mind when you're removing these plugs. You do need to try and preserve both the plugs and try not to damage the actual flashing itself, because obviously that's stopping the water getting through. Now we do need to try and preserve these the best we can because we will be reusing them, and obviously the whole point of doing any DIY job is to save money, so let's not damage them unnecessarily and have to go and spend money replacing them. Now whilst a lot of these plugs can be quite difficult to get out, some do of course come out very easily, which is always a nice surprise. So once you've removed the plugs then, just scrape out the mortar very gently, peel back the flashing and just make sure that you've got a nice clean joint.
There's a nice one, look. Nice big hole there for the rain to get through. The problem with these lead plugs inserted like this is the fact that when you insert them to keep the lead in place, then it makes it very difficult to put the mortar in the gaps. That's got a big split down at there, look, as you can see.
Okay, so once you've removed the plugs and cleaned out the area around the flashing, you need to then proceed with raking out the mortar for the remaining bricks. And I've certainly found the best way of doing this is to use an angle grinder with a mortar raking bit. So these can be purchased from places like Screwfix, although they are widely available elsewhere, and these are a really effective and very cost-effective way of removing the mortar. You can use a mortar raking disc, but these do make a hell of a lot of mess. And as we can see in the footage here, look, this works very well indeed. It certainly keeps the dust down. But what I've had to do as well is to put up an old curtain against the next door neighbour's window just to try and minimise the amount of dust which it kicks up on their property. Right, so I must apologise for the rather shaky footage in the next few clips. So I'm bouncing on a ladder. I've got a camera in one hand, angle grinder in the other, but I thought it was worth just taking a few minutes just to take some footage, just to show you guys a closer up view of how everything works. Okay, so we're making some progress then. Once we break out the old mortar, we then need to clean those joins up. And I use a vacuum cleaner. You can use a blower if you want to, an old brush, it's entirely up to you. I prefer to use the vacuum cleaner because it keeps down the amount of mess, the amount of dust. And I use the Evolution. It's a wet and dry bag, absolutely fantastic, very portable, very manoeuvrable, and perfect for a job like this. Okay, so when we're finished cleaning down the brickwork and the joins, the next thing to do is to use the old lead plugs to reattach the flashing. As I may have already mentioned, they're just thin strips of lead which have been folded up. You just need to do the same thing. The only difference is the fact that I won't be using all of the lead in the plugs because you don't need to. I'll just strip them down basically, mould them with a set of pliers and then push them to the back of the joint, making sure that the lead plug is actually clamping the flashing into place. And the reason I like pushing the plugs back into the joint is because you can mortar over it and it leaves a very nice, clean, tidy finish. The important thing is though that you make sure that the plug is actually clamping the flashing in place.
Okay. If you use the bottom of the hamlock, it just means that you don't unnecessarily dent or distort the lead.
Right, so having damped down the wall then, the next thing we need to do is to mix up some mortar. I use the pre-mixed stuff. It's so simple to use, it's nice, good quality, and it's strong. All you need to do is add the right volume of water to get the right consistency, which is what you can see that I've mixed up in the bucket.
Go with this. Okay, so it's a bit wetter.
So when repointing a wall then, I always do the perps first. This seems to be pretty standard within the industry. I use a scraper. It's either 3 or 4 inches, I can't remember, but it's a standard decorating scraper. And I find this absolutely perfect for doing the perps or the perpendiculars. So they're the vertical joins between the brickwork then. So I always do these first. The important thing is to make sure that you do push this mortar right to the back of that gap, just to make sure that it's as strong and full as possible. And as you can see from the video footage, look, it's an absolute cinch using this scraper. So one of the things I would say to you then, as a DIYer, as a novice, when you're doing repointing, don't try and do too much in one go. So, you know, just do it in nice manageable chunks. And the reason is because even though you're filling up these gaps, you do need to tool them, and you don't want to let the mortar get too hard so you can't actually tool it properly. If you want to get a nice decent finish, then you still got to, the mortar's still got to be workable basically. So just do a little bit at a time, and then just go back and tool it up, and then go and move on and do a little bit more basically. Now I must apologise because a lot of the footage which I've taken, I've actually got a GoPro on top of the hedge. I've also got one on a headband, but the thing is, the footage is a little bit shaky because, as you can see, I'm bouncing on top of a ladder. I'm holding the hawk in one hand, I've got the trowel in another, and I'm bobbing around a bit basically. So what I've had to do, look, is just to splice in different bits of video footage just to try and give you a decent idea as to what I'm doing. And I've also spliced in some footage of the pointing I did beneath the bay window, just to show you exactly the way I've been doing this, if it's not clear from the footage of me doing the higher bits on the wall, if that makes any sense.
Make sure you put it right in. Push it right. It's easy look, rather than stretching over, just use a different shot look. It's certainly easier for me to do it this way, balancing on top of this ladder.
So with regard to the tooling up then, I just use one of these tooling bits for brickwork, so it gives you a concave finish. They're slightly different sizes on each end. There's a wider one which is obviously lends itself to doing the wider joints, but if you've got a narrower joint, then you can just basically swap it around, use the other end and still tool in the mortar to get a nice finish. Now you don't need to be precious about this, you just need to push this mortar in as far back as possible. What you're trying to do is to compact it so it's a really nice tight mix, and to push it back into the joint so it's not going to fall out. So basically you don't need to baby it. And when it comes to the tooling, I always do the perbs first, just the same as when I apply the mortar.
Now if you look a bit low, like for example on this area here, I'll come back and just top that up. That's what you do, just the same as we did at the bottom.
Right, so once you've tooled up the mortar, I like to get a little pointing trowel, so something with a thin blade, just to remove any mortar which may have actually stuck to the adjacent brickwork. Now, because I'm not experienced at doing this, then you will see that there is some mortar on the brickwork. It will cause a little bit of staining, which can be brushed off most of the time. So whilst the repointing won't be the tidiest and crispest job you've ever seen, it will still be fit for purpose, and for what it's cost me to do this myself, which is an absolute bargain. And I'll put the price at the end of the video. It's to be expected, and I haven't got a problem with it. So here then I've included a couple of clips of both sides where I've repointed the flashing, and I think you'll agree it looks quite nice and tidy, especially for a DIYer. Right folks, so we've come to the end of the video then, and I just want to finish off by having a look at the costs, because that's going to be the question which is uppermost on most people's mind. So caveman, how much did it cost to repoint 2/3 of the front of this 3-bedroom semi-detached house? So basically I've repointed up to the bottom of the first floor window, and I've also made sure that the flashing is all nice and secured and all the rest of it. It comes in at a bargain price of £37.58. That is an absolutely extraordinary bargain. Now the sealant is of course optional. You may not need it, and if you don't need it, the price comes down to £22.59, which is an extraordinarily small sum of money given the protection it affords your property and the way in which you're actually protecting your asset. So the next question then, just to finish off then, is, well, okay, how much did you save by doing the job yourself rather than getting in a contractor? So the minimum you're going to get charged by a contractor is going to be about £450 for this. I did it for £37.58, so basically I saved myself the grand sum of £412.42 approximately. Once again, this is a phenomenal saving, and it just goes to show that if you're able-bodied, if you've got a can-do attitude, and you're prepared to try, prepared to make mistakes, then you can save an extraordinary amount of money, and that is obviously never been more important than it is in these current economic times. Right folks, so thanks once again for tuning in. I do appreciate it. If you like the video, please give it the thumbs up, please subscribe, share it widely with your family and your friends. Take care all. Bye bye.